All right, welcome to a national real estate exam prep. And today we're going to talk about property ownership and property disclosures. And so through this, we have a couple slides that we're going to get through. And through those slides, hopefully it's going to gain you some clarity, for your national real estate exam. So to start this thing off, let's talk about property ownership section. And when we're talking about property ownership, this is the one thing that we need to make sure that we're very, very clear about. There are only three primary methods of land legal descriptions used in identifying land. All right. So there's only three. There's only three you're going to be, tested on. And as we're going through, and this is what it is, you have the United States Governmental Survey System, which also could be called the Rectangular Survey System. And so that's the photo on the far right that you can see, and that's truly what this thing looks like in a sense. So this is like one of the images that you could see. The other thing, we have meets and bounds. So meets and bounds is on the far left, and you can kind of see the photo of the meets and bounds, and that's truly what this is. And we're going to dive into that a little bit. And then the middle, we have lot and block, which they also might call your recorded plat system. So as we're going through this, what we're going to do is we're going to dive into each one of these three a little bit deeper. Now, what I think you could see one question on your exam, and that question could say, which one of these is not a valid legal description? All right. So as we're going through, we see all three of these. These are valid legal descriptions. So we have meets and bounds, we have lot and block, we have recorded plat system, governmental survey, or rectangular survey system. Now, on the test, what I think they're going to do is they're going to say which one of these is not valid. Meets and bounds, they don't have another name for meets and bounds. What I think they're going to do to you, though, is they're going to say meets and bounds, recorded plat system, and maybe rectangular survey system. They're going to use like the name that isn't truly like in your head, that you're thinking of like top of mind stuff. It's going to be like the other name that it could use. So it's going to want you to trip over like rectangular survey system or recorded plat system. And the answer is this: it's the street address. All right. So the street address is not a valid legal description. And so that's how they're going to lay up this question. Which one of these is not a valid legal description? It's going to be the home address, the property address. They may throw the tax assessor's number at you. I don't think that they will, yet they could. So if you get the question, it says tax assessor or 123 Main Street, the home address, neither one of those is a valid legal description. That's just another way of identifying the home. So let's look at this thing. So we're talking about the governmental survey system. So when we're talking about the government survey system, we're talking about imaginary lines. And those lines that run east to west, those are going to be called baselines. All right. So east to west, we have baselines. Then the imaginary lines that are running north to south, those are principal meridian lines. All right. So test question, as you're going through, they could say east and west imaginary lines. Those are called baselines. And north to south, those are principal meridians. Now, as we're looking at this, we have a standard township. So a standard township is 6 miles square. So that's what we're looking at right now. You can see this is 6 by 6. And that's what we're looking at. What I think you could see a test question around, like maybe one of you could see something along the lines of it asking inside of the township, what sections run parallel to like 16. All right. So find 16 on the map. And you can see that this is a reverse snake. We start from the right and we snake down and we drop down on the left and we snake back to the right. We drop down and then we go back to the left. You can see that this is kind of backwards. This isn't truly how we look through and, right in the United States, yet this is what our government survey system is. So it starts on the right and works its way to the left, drops down and works across. And so if you get a question like this and it says, what section that runs parallel to 16. And so your answers are going to be 9, 17, 15, and 21. I would recommend knowing how to write this. Again, I don't think that everyone is going to get this question yet. I do think it could pop up. And so when I'm going into the test, you get a piece of paper. All right. So you get a piece of paper and a pencil, and you get to write whatever you want on this thing. They do not care. You do have to turn it in at the end. So you can't be writing down questions that you had some questions around. Yet you're going to have a piece of paper and a pencil, and you can do whatever you want with it. One of the things that I would do is probably just go brain dump this, right? And just write it. I'm going to go 1 through 6, down to 7, across back to 12, and just draw this. So if you do get a question where it says, what sections run parallel with 16, you know it's 9, 17, 15, 21. It could move over, it could say 14. Then it's 11, 15, 13, 23. It's not touching the corners. They're running parallel with them. Your township, again, 6 by 6 square miles. And each township is further divided into 36 1-mile tracts called sections. All right. So we're looking at sections here. So you can see that number 36 is a section. And what we've done is we dropped it down here on the far right-hand corner. In the far right-hand corner, you could get a question around this. And what we need to know is that each section contains 640 acres, which is 1 mile by 1 mile. All right. So 640 acres equals 1 mile squared. And what we're looking at the far corner is you could get a math problem around this governmental survey system. And if we're looking at this thing, we divide it up into quarters. So what you're going to do for the math problem is you're going to take your 640 and then you're just going to divide it by however what it tells you to divide. So you can see this, we're looking at the northwest quarter, the northeast quarter, the southwest quarter, and the southeast quarter of section 36. So each quarter section has 160 acres. Again, I don't think that everyone's going to get a test question that is going to evolve around the governmental survey system, but these are the types of questions that if you do get them, this is what I think they're going to be. Baseline and principal meridians. Township is 6 by 6. Each township has 36 sections in it, and each section is 640 acres. And each section is 1 mile square, so 1 by 1. And if we were to go through, we know that each of these 640 acres can be divided. And just for the sake of this, we divide it into 1/4 sections, which means that 160 acres per quarter. And just in case you guys don't know, right, we're looking at a compass and north, east, south, west. That's how it goes. And so if they ask you, you know, how many acres are in the northeast quarter, well, that's a layup. You know that it's the top right-hand side. The next one we're going to look at is lot and block. So lots and blocks were used in colonial America before rectangular survey system was introduced. So this is before the last one we just looked at. Like this was a system that was used prior. So it could appear on recorded maps and plats of subdivided land, right? We get a piece of land, we subdivide it, and that's where we go through and we use the lot and block system. Lot and blocks are used in the legal description of parcels in subdivisions. And for anyone that's gone through and has gone to like a new build, right? You've gone to a new build community where you're going into a model home, right? You walk into the garage where they've turned it into a sales office. Well, this is what they have on the board, right? Like they have like red and green. And if they're going through, all the red are sold, right? Little circle dots on here. And then they have the green dots, which are the available ones. So if you've ever been to a new build, like this is the system that is being used for your visual representation. As we're looking at this thing, a block is the larger unit of measure, and a parcel of land divided into blocks, usually designated based on roads within the property. Each block is further divided into individual lots, which are sold separately. And if you look at the top here, you can see it's lot 1 of block 2, Then we have lot 2 of block 2, and it just keeps going through. So we're on block 2, and each one of these houses is on a different lot. All right. So when you would see this, maybe something on the test would truly be around new builds or subdivided land. This is where this is going to show up. Then we have meets and bounds. Meets and bounds goes by no other name. And this visual representation at the top right, I think this is pretty solid just for visual representation of what you should be looking for on this test. And I jumped around a little bit just to show you guys. And so you can see this start here. And so your start here is known as the point of beginning. All right. So all of them start at a point of beginning. And then they trace the outline of the property. All right. So they go through and trace the outline of your property boundaries. Meets and bounds descriptions come from a system that measures and identifies land by describing either land's boundaries based on the land's relations to its natural or cultural features. And these features are called monuments. They could also go by just degrees and feet. And so I kind of mix matched it here. So if you're looking at this, we have the point of beginning, and it's going to take us to the first monument. And it is a rock or a boulder, some kind of natural feature. Then we're going to take a left on here, and it's going to take us to this tree. What I actually think you're going to see is they're going to talk about monuments such as the old oak tree. I actually think that's going to be the test question. It's going to say something around monuments and the old oak tree, and that's going to give it away. That's going to be meets and bounds. Like that's going to be your answer right there when it's going to say which one of these legal descriptions is based off of monuments, i.e. the old oak tree. Then what we're going to do, we're going to hang another left. We're going to go 200 feet. We're going to hang a right. We're going to go 300 feet back to the point of beginning. We're going to close this off. Now, they're not going to say left and right. They're going to say north, east, south, west. Like that's what they're going to say. They're going to say turn north, then turn west, then turn south, then turn east until you hit the point of beginning. Like that's what this is going to look like. But they're going to either have you do feet or minutes or some kind of degree or these monuments. This is your meets and bounds. So monuments and point of beginning are going to be your key indicator for these test questions when we're talking about the meets and bounds section. Now, here's some important vocabulary that we need to keep in mind. So when we're going through, and again, this is all property ownership. These are all property ownership type examples that we're going to have to know. And so we're talking about encumbrances. So anything which affects or limits the fee simple title to or the value of the property. This could be mortgages, right? The mortgage is an encumbrance on the house. Or it could be an easement that a neighbor has or the utility company has. Anything that actually takes away from this property is going to be an encumbrance. All right. Mortgages. The easement, like your Excel, right? So we have your energy company has the ability to look at your meter on your home. That would be an encumbrance because that would be an easement. A general lien. This is just any lien that is put on by a debtor. And when we're going through the exam, what we need to know is that the OR is always the giver and the EE is always the receiver. So this is someone giving a lien, right? We're not looking to get a lien, but this is someone that is given a lien. And so that's a general lien. What we do now is we got a couple different ones. So involuntary. An involuntary lien is something that is without the owner's consent. The owner didn't consent to having a lien put on their home, yet they have one. Now, this is the thing. Like as we're going through here, the owner did something to actually have this lien put on their home. It's not like they just woke up one day and had it. The other one that we have is a judgment lien. So a judgment lien would be a legal claim on the property. All right. So the judge goes through here and they create a judgment. All right. There's a judgment, and the judgment maybe is to have the property sold for payment of the amount of the judgment. All right. So they're going through and they're saying, hey, you owe X amount of dollars. And so they put a judgment lien on the home so that when the home is sold, that money comes off of the home to pay the judgment. And this is something that you're really going to go court for. And it's because something has happened that obviously a judge and a jury have decided that this person was guilty of, and they needed to put this on the home. Mechanics lien. A mechanics lien is going to come through for someone that is doing work or furnishing materials for improvements of the property, right? This is a contractor. Like when I see mechanics lien, I want to go to a contractor. This is someone that's maybe doing the deck. All right. They're doing the deck. Maybe they're doing a kitchen remodel, something along those lines. That is where we're going to have these mechanics liens. We have a specific lien. So we talked about a general lien, and that's just any property. All right. That's any piece of your property. That could be on your artwork. That could be on your car, your boat, right? General lien. Well, specific lien actually only attaches to the property. All right. So a specific lien is 123 Main Street. I don't care if you have 3-4 houses. A specific lien is only going to attach to one of those, so that when you go to sell that one house, the money comes off to pay off the lien. All right. So a specific lien. Then we have a tax lien, and this is imposed by law. All right. Uncle Sam wants his taxes. One of the things that you're going to need to keep in mind for a tax lien is that it does not matter when the tax lien is put on, it goes into position number 1. All right. So this is what we need to think about. We go through and we get a loan to go purchase a house, right? And so let's talk about the voluntary lien, then we'll go through this. So the voluntary lien is actually something that the owner puts on with their consent. All right. So let's play this. So you're going through and you need money to buy 123 Main Street. So you go to the bank and you say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Banker, I need to borrow $500,000. And they say, okay, what's the collateral? And you say, well, I'm going to go buy a house with that collateral. And they say, awesome. So you're putting a voluntary lien on a home to get money. You are the mortgagor. The bank is the mortgagee, important for the test. And as we're going through, that creates a voluntary lien. And not only is it a voluntary lien, but it's a specific lien. It's a lien on one home. All right. So we put a voluntary lien on 123 Main Street to be able to get money to buy it. We become the mortgagor. The bank is the mortgagee. All this is going to pop up in some way or shape or form on your exam. We're looking through, and let's talk about easements. There's a lot of different easements and different things going on in here. And we have easement, a right or privilege or interest limited to a specific purpose, which one party has in the land of another. And so an easement truly, like my mind goes to the utility company. All right. The utility company has the right to jump your fence and to go to your electrical panel and to look at the usage that is coming from your home. All right. So that is an easement. Then we have an easement of prudent. And this benefits the dominant estate and runs with the land. All right. So who's the dominant estate? The dominant estate is the property that is using somebody else's property. All right. So when you're talking about dominant versus servient, because those are going to be important to know, the dominant estate is the estate that is taking from the servient. Dominant takes, servient gives. All right. So when we're talking about a prudent, maybe you have this. This is something that is going to go through, and maybe you have been driving over your neighbor's land for so much time, and we're going to go through and it becomes an imprudent easement by a prudence. We have easement by necessity. Easement by necessity, again, we are taking from the servient and given to the dominant. And what this is going to look like is maybe the home is landlocked. All right. So you have this parcel You have this parcel of property, and there is no way to get to the house because there's all these other homes that are surrounding this house. So think of farmland. All right. This is where I want your minds to go. Think farmland, and there's no way to get to the house. Well, the easement by necessity would be where we go through and we create a driveway through somebody else's property. All right. So the neighbor next door becomes servient because we're putting the driveway through their land and attaching it to the dominant's land. The dominant's taking, the servient's giving. Then we have by prescription. And really, with prescription, it's someone that is going through, it's hostile, it's continuous, and it's open. All right. So this is going through, it's happening for many years. No one's stopping it. You're seeing them doing this. This could be something where, I don't know, like you're going through and they have something on your property and they're just accessing your property over and over and over again, and you have done nothing about it. Then it's hostile. It's continued. They're not trying to hide it. They're not remorseful about doing it. They're just doing it. Then we have the easement in gross. It benefits an individual or legal entity rather than the dominant estate. All right. So we're going through the easement in gross, where my mind's going to go is maybe it's the power company for let's go with cable, right? So we have those cable lines that are going over the houses, right? In some of the older neighborhoods, because in the newer neighborhoods they put it underground, which same thing, but we're going to just visualize it above our airspace at this point. So the easement in gross, we have these power lines with the cable for the TV that are running across. That would be the easement in gross. It's benefiting an individual, not necessarily the property. Like the property does not need access to cable. It does need access to be able to get into it. That's why it's a little bit different. So your easement in gross, it benefits an individual. Cable TV is a benefit for a person rather than the property. Again, servient is the person that is giving up. Dominant is the person that is taking. Servient is serving. Dominant is dominant, is where my mind goes with this. When we're talking about property ownership, we're going to need to know these. Severalty. Severalty is just one. All right, that's sole ownership. And so you guys know, an LLC, a corporation, and an individual, those three can have severalty. If you get a test question, right, and I think you could, a test question around severalty, the question is going to be around which one of these cannot own a piece of property in severalty, and they're going to give you LLC, they're going to give you corporation, they're going to give you an individual, and the answer that can't is going to be a partnership. Partnerships too. Right? So partnership's actually two people. So obviously we can't have severalty if two people own it. An LLC can be one, a corporation can be one, and obviously an individual is one. We have joint tenancy. So when we're talking about joint tenancy, this is undivided ownership of a property interest by two or more people, each whom have a right to the equal share in interest and a right of survivorship. The right to share equally with other surviving joint tenants in the interest of the deceased joint tenant. So a couple things. You're going through this house, and let's just pretend it's owned by two just for the sake of math. And so two people own this home. Well, it's saying undivided. It's an equal share. That means that it's 50-50 in ownership, yet there's not this blue tape that's down the house saying you get that half and this is my half. That's not how this works. It's 50-50 ownership of everything. Now, the important piece of joint tenancy is this. It's the right of survivorship. All right. Which means this: if there's two owners and one of the owners passes away, the rights go to the surviving owner. That is the right of survivorship. And you're going to need to know that for the exam. The right of survivorship is on joint tenancy. When one of the owners dies, the interest in the ownership goes to the surviving owners. It could be 2 owners, 3 owners, 4 owners, 5 owners, whatever. When we're talking about tenancy in common, though, again, we're talking about 2 or more people. They hold undivided interest. but there is no right of survivorship. All right. So if we're talking about two again, just for easy math, and one of the people dies, they can actually will their interest. So if it's 50-50 interest and one of the owners dies, they can actually will their 50% to their heirs or whomever they want to will it to. It also doesn't need to be equal, right? So joint tenancy needs to be equal, right? We're talking 50-50. If it's two people, if it's three people, we're talking 33, 33, 33, four people, 25, 25, 25, 25. Well, tenancy in common, you could have 80% and 20% if it's talking two people, right? What's also interesting about this is you may get a test question, and this test question might be around, two people own the home as joint tenants, and they want to sell a interest in their home. How will that third person take title? Well, they're going to take it as a tenant in common. All right. They're going to go tenancy in common. So you're going to have joint tenant, tenancy in common, tenant in common. Okay. So one of the things is when joint tenancy happens is they all have to take place at the same time. All right. So they all buy the house. They're all entitled day one. Well, on tenancy in common, they can come in and out at any time. So if you bring a third person in to to a house that already has tenancy in common, the two original owners will be tenancy in common. The two original owners will be joint tenancy, and the third one will come in as tenancy in common. That's how this is going to play out. I think you may see a test question like that. Continuing on property ownership, what we need to do is kind of know some of the vocabulary around different house styles. Specifically, when I think it gets interesting when we're talking about condos, cooperatives, and timeshares. And specifically, when we're talking about those, let's talk about like common elements. So, common elements are the spaces in the building that are actually shared by all the residents, right? Lobbies, the corridors, the elevators, the stairs, maybe the playground. All right. So these are all the things that all the tenants that live in this space get to use. No one owns the stairwell. No one owns the elevator. Not only do you not own it, but you probably have a percentage to use of it, depending on how many people are in it. And it doesn't mean that you get the corner of the elevator. It just means that the percentage of ownership of that elevator is to everybody. Condo. So a condominium, has undivided interest in common portions of the real estate, right? So we were just talking about that, the common elements. And then you have a separate interest in your unit. All right. So you have a separate interest in your unit. You own 123 Main Street, Unit A, and you get to use the park, right? That would be the common element. The home is yours, the unit is yours. Now, we might get a test question, and it might say something around which one of these would affect your condominium ownership. All right. It's going to give you a bunch of stuff. And it's going to say, this, but the question is going to say all of these except. All right. So it's going to give you this whole list of things that could affect your condominium ownership, except what? And the except what is going to be this: one of the other condos being foreclosed. So a foreclosure in the building does not affect your condo. And that's going to be the answer. So if you get that test question and they're going through and they're going to say which one of these will not affect the ownership of a separate condominium, it's if your neighbor gets foreclosed on, that's not going to mess with your ownership. We have a cooperative, and this is owned by a corporation, and they are giving tenancy through shares. All right. So when they talk about a cooperative, I really want you to think of like you own stock. You have a piece of stock, and with this stock, you have the ability to occupy the building. All right. Cooperative, I want you to think stock, shares, and you get to operate the building. Now, this is the thing, it's going to look just like a condo, right? It's going to look and feel and operate just like a condo, except for how you occupy the unit. Condominium, you own, you buy the property. Cooperative, you have a stock. All right. You have a share of stock, and that gives you access to the cooperative. And then a timeshare, guys, just so if you get a timeshare question, I do see that that is still on the exam. And the timeshare, as we're going through this, is truly going to be where you're purchasing time. Like really what that is purchasing time. So let's say this, there's four owners in a timeshare, and each one of them owns a season, right? So we're talking spring, summer, fall, winter. And what they do is owner one gets spring, owner two gets summer, owner three gets fall, owner four gets winter. And what typically happens is they rotate. So then owner one next time will have summer, and so on and so forth. And that's kind of what a timeshare is. You have a property, and that property you own time of that property. That's a timeshare. Keeping going down this property ownership, we need to know what a freehold estate is. And so a freehold estates are indefinite durations. All right. We have an indefinite duration that can be forever, right? Or just for your lifetime. All right. So the first one is this non-freehold. So we have a non-freehold estate, and that just means that it's less than freehold. All right. So a non-freehold means it's less than. And so here's a couple examples of that. We have tenancy for years. So tenancy for years is also called an estate for years or tenancy for a definite term. This is an estate that is created by a lease. I think you're going to see a test question around this. And I want you to know this. A tenancy for years does not mean that it can't be for 3 days. It does not mean that it can't be for 1 month. It does not mean that it can't be for 1 year or 99 years. A tenancy for years just means that it has a definite start date and a definite end date. It does not dictate the length. The test question that they're going to throw at you is going to be tripping you up over that. And they want you to think that it has to be from year to year or 1 year to 3 years or whatever. This thing could literally be for 5 days. It just has a definite start date and a definite end date. Your tenancy for period to period is that I want you to think of this as like your month to month. All right. So we have the tenancy for years. That's just a normal rent. Tenancy for years, right? We sign a contract. It's for a year, it's for 2 years, 3 years, whatever. Well, the tenancy for period to period is when that lease ends. That's what I want you to think of. Tenancy from period to period, I want you to think month to month, right? The landlord says, hey, you don't need to sign a new contract. We're just going to operate on the same playground rules that we've been operating on in the past. So you're going to go through and you don't need to sign a new lease, yet you know what your monthly rent's going to be. You know what day it's owed on. You know all the rules from when the lease was in place. This is just saying that you're going to play by those same rules, but we're not going to sign paperwork. And it's not going to be good for the rest of the term, right? If you were on a month to month, like that's how you were paying your bills. Same thing here. Your tenancy at will or an estate at will exists of the pleasure of both the leaseor, again, OR is the giver, and the leasee, the EE, that's the receiver. This could be terminated at any time. And this is what I want you to think about. Tenancy at will is like this. You had a tenancy for years, and it came to a conclusion. And now the tenancy at will is turned on. It's like this. It says, hey, I'm selling my house. And you can continue to rent this home until I sell it, because the new owner of the home does not want tenants. So you're going to have to move out there. That's the tenancy at will. It's saying that at any time, either party can end the deal. You might not know how long it's going to take, but you're just saying like, hey, we're just going to play this by ear. You can stay here. You're going to be paying rent. Like there's still rent. Everything is still happening. Yet at any time, either party can turn it off. And then tenancy at sufferance. I like to think of a tenancy at sufferance as like a squatter. All right. This is someone that's not paying rent. They could have started paying rent and then they stopped. But this, I think of a squatter in this case, and that is where my mind goes for a tenancy at sufferance. It's unlawful. Maybe it started off lawful, but yet it changes. All right. They're not paying rent. They're not leaving. This is a tenancy at sufferance. A couple things that we need to keep in mind. Adverse material fact or an adverse material defect. All right. So this is a detail, and this is a detail that could affect someone's decision in a real estate transaction and goes against the interest of one of the parties involved. And for an example, the example would be like an environmental hazard, zoning violations, water damage, structural problems, health issues. If a seller or broker knows about such issues with a property, they are required to disclose them. So, guys, this kind of goes back to like the seller's property disclosure and everything else. As you're going through, and if you, the agent, know of an adverse material fact, you must disclose it. And it doesn't mean that if it's going to hurt your client, you don't have to, right? Because it probably will hurt your client, in the short run, not the long run, because we need to disclose. That's how we're going to protect ourselves and the client. Yet when we're going through, we need to keep in mind that an adverse material fact, while yes, it could hurt the client up front, we are obligated by law to disclose it to a potential customer. We have a latent defect, and this is a hidden problem or flaw in a property that is not immediately visible or discoverable through a standard inspection, right? So an adverse material fact, they're probably going to find it, but yet we still got to disclose it. A latent defect might be this. Maybe we have a leaky roof, all right? Be thinking about that. When's the roof going to be leaking? When it rains. So if the home inspection is happening during a sunny day, if they purchase the home, right, they walk through the open house and it was a sunny day, they're not going to know that the roof leaks when it rains. We must disclose it. All right. We have to disclose that the roof leaks. Maybe we know that there is a foundation crack behind a wall. Well, an inspection is not going to find that. There's no world where an inspector even is going to be able to look through the drywall and be like, you know what? There's a crack there. That's impossible. We must disclose. Your seller must disclose. And you, if you know, must disclose. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is that it's called a red flag issue. And so a red flag issue is something that maybe we don't have the expertise in, but yet something seems off to us as real estate agents. So a red flag issue is going through and saying we go through and we see we have like a musty odor that we're picking up, or we're looking up and we see something on the ceiling. Maybe there's a crack on the foundation. Like maybe we're in the basement and it's an unfinished basement and we notice a crack. Well, these are the things where we're going to raise our hand and we're going to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you might want to have a professional look at this, right? We're not the professional. We're not the person. So keep in mind, guys, we are not the professional that's saying, oh, that stain up there, that water stain, that's no big deal. It looks like it's old, right? Like you don't have to worry about that. That looks like an old stain. No. We don't do that. Well, we're going to go through and we're going to say, hey, I noticed that. I don't know if you noticed it, but it might be something you want to look at. Whether they look at it or not, it's okay. Yet we have to be able to be cognizant to see it and call it out. An old water heater, right? That's an expensive cost. And this is the thing. We need to make sure that our clients are seeing it. We have gone through real estate school. We are the experts in this situation. And I get it. Like you might be one day into the business, you might be 30 years into the business, yet you still have these expertise more so than the general public does. That's a red flag issue. That means that, hey, we see it, we need to call it out. When we're going through and still property ownership, and we're talking about these federal rules that are required of any knowledge or presence of lead-based paint, right? These are disclosures things, right? So we're talking about property ownership disclosure. And when we're talking about disclosure, lead-based paint is anything in a home prior to 1978. So if you have a home built on or before January 1st, 1978, there is a requirement for a lead-based paint disclosure. All right. Also keep this in mind. This is a legal component of the contract, the lead-based paint disclosure. If you have a home that was built on or before January 1st, 1978, and there is no lead-based paint disclosure, your contract is void. You have a void contract. It's not a valid contract because you're missing a legal component. All right. So we know to have a valid contract, you must have all the legal components that are necessary. One of those components is missing, like the lead-based paint disclosure. Now the contract is void and we have an issue. We also have to know what asbestos is. So asbestos was used many years ago around pretty much everything to insulate it. Plumbing pipes, heating ducts, the flooring, roofing materials, right? Anything, it was used. And so they were going through, and you guys could probably walk through some of these kitchens right now. Maybe it's your current kitchen, maybe it's grandma's kitchen, whatever. You're walking through the home and you see those peel and stick tiles, or maybe the linoleum flooring, right? Like there's like a yellow or an off white. It probably has asbestos in it. Now, here's the thing. It's perfectly safe as long as it is not fraying, right? The frayability is actually the issue. Like when the dust gets kicked up or something weird, that's when it becomes an issue. So the frayability as we're going through is when asbestos, right? Like the dust starts falling through. You might be going through and thinking about popcorn ceiling. So popcorn ceiling could have asbestos in it. All right. So if there's asbestos in it and you want to remove it, it's going to require special circumstances for people to come in and clean it up. And they're going to have to wear their hazmat suits. And they're going to wear the face masks. And they're going to go through and they're going to remove it. Well, the other thing that they can do is they can do what's called encapsulating. All right. So this is what I want you to picture. I want you to picture the ceiling and I want you to picture the popcorn. And what they do is they actually take new drywall and they put it on the old drywall and they screw it in. That encapsulates it. So that is making sure that it's encapsulated. There's no way that it's going to, the frayability is going to be able to happen. No dust is going to be able to come down because it is encapsulated between the other drywall. That is one way that you can mitigate it. And then one of the things we have to know is carbon monoxide, right? CO detectors. Any appliance or device that uses combustion, water heaters, fireplace, furnaces, they burn fuels like natural gas, oil, wood. They produce carbon monoxide. Now, on your test, it might say a colorless, odorless, tasteless gas. If you get a test question, they say, what is a colorless, odorless, tasteless gas? That's carbon monoxide. So carbon monoxide, it is deadly. All right. You fall asleep and there's a big carbon monoxide leak, you're not waking up. I actually think that could be a test question too. They could say, what's a colorless, odorless, tasteless gas that would kill you in your sleep? It's carbon monoxide. And so this is a big deal that we have to have carbon monoxide detectors. And as we're going through this thing, this is what we're going to need to know. Carbon monoxide, colorless, tasteless, odorless gas that is deadly. As we're going through and we're talking about disclosure still with property ownership, real estate licensees must be vigilant and around potential environmental hazards. All right. So again, we're not the expert and we don't know what they all are, but we know when we're supposed to seek advice. All right. So you're going through and we see an external hazard, right? Maybe it's something around the air quality, the noise level, public health, safety, something. And I don't mean safety as like it's a bad neighborhood, right? I mean like there's something wrong with the environmental hazards that's coming around. Maybe you're right next to a landfill. All right. Maybe you're going through and the home is actually built on a landfill. Like that's a thing. And it's our job to be able to call it out if it's noticeable. All right. So no, you're not supposed to be able to like, oh, hey, this was converted from a landfill, 40 years ago. No, that's beyond our expertise. Yet if we notice something, we are supposed to bring it up to our clients. And it says possible threats include global warming, which can affect coastal sea conditions that lead to flooding, as well as water contamination from leaking underground sources. Environmental site assessments are one of the methods, right? So we have the environmental site assessment, which is 4 phases. And they go through and they have this site tested to make sure that it is okay. Again, we're not doing the assessment. We are not the people that are going through and saying, hey, you know what? I don't think that's a big deal. That's not our job. We can't do that. What our job though is we say, you know what? That looks off. You, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, may want to have that looked at. Again, we're not responsible for disclosing the hazards. Yet, if it could be proven that we should have seen them, we will be held accountable. This is the thing, guys. Like all these laws and rules were put in place to protect the public, not to protect us as real estate agents. Like everything that is in our laws and rules are to protect the public, not us. Then it brings us to stigmatized properties. Now, stigmatized properties are viewed as something negative. All right. Now, this in Colorado, different states vary, but in Colorado, we're not having to do anything with stigmatizing a property. Like if it's going to stigmatize a property, we're not saying anything. A couple examples of that. HIV or AIDS. If the current homeowner had HIV or AIDS, it's not our job to disclose. We're not going out there and saying, hey, I just want to let you know that the current seller had AIDS. No. You know how much blood would have to be in the home for that to matter? An extreme amount. So we're not disclosing that. It does not affect the value of the home. Casper. All right. We're not disclosing ghost in Colorado. Different states may vary, but in Colorado, we're not going to do that. And so, like, if your client says, "Hey, you know what? I have neighbors. They live in the house, roommates. They live up in the attic, and around 2, 3 a.m., they come down and they walk the halls with chains." And no, we're not disclosing ghost in the house. And the other one would be like a homicide or suicide. If someone was shot or killed themselves in a home, we're not disclosing that. And what I want everyone to think about, and this is the reason why, I can't remember the show, but up in Firestone, there was a Netflix series that went through about this man that killed his wife and killed his 2 kids in Colorado. Right? It was all over. It was all over Netflix. I can't remember the show. I think it was something evil, and it was real. Like it was a documentary. It was real, and it happened. And they went through and they showed like what they could show, and they showed like Ring doorbell cameras, and they were interviewing the family and everything. Well, here's the thing: that home did not sell for years. I'm talking like 10+ years. That home did not sell after that because it stigmatized the property. Nothing was wrong with the home, right? It was still the same amount of bedrooms, same amount of bathrooms in good conditions. Yet evil lived in that home, right? That was going through everyone's head. Something evil happened in that home. An evil person lived in that home, and it stigmatized the house. And so the house would not sell, even though there's nothing wrong with the house. Everyone just knew something evil happened in that house and they didn't want to be in it. That's a stigmatized property. As a real estate agent, we don't disclose any of that stuff. Again, we're going to disclose if there's a crack in the wall. We're going to disclose if the roof leaks, but we're not going to disclose if a ghost lives in the house. All right. Then if our client says, "Hey, there's a ghost," we're not disclosing there's a ghost in the house. The other thing is Megan's Law. All right. So properties can also be stigmatized by sexual offenders in the neighborhood. And I know a lot of people are going to feel very strongly about this. And what I would say is we have no obligation to disclose. And this is the reason why. We don't know if the website has been updated. We don't know if the sexual offender that should be on that list has registered. We don't know this. We have no clue. So the site may not be updated. The sexual offender that should have registered might not have registered. And if our client buys the house because we told them we're all clear, you're going to get sued. So it's not our responsibility. What we're probably going to do is we're going to recommend that they speak to local law enforcement and see what resources that they have. And I'm telling you, if anyone's ever seen this list, like you can go to the police station and get this. If you're interested in it, you can get it. It's a packet. Like you can get it by the city if you want. And so go in and say, hey, I'm interested in this city, and they'll give you a packet. It will tell you where the person lives, how old they were when they committed the crime, what the crime was, and how old they are now. Like it will go through and it will tell you everything. And they're pretty thick if you go and get a city. So we don't stigmatize properties. We have no disclosure when it comes to Megan's Law. And again, that's to protect us because that's how you get sued. Make sure that we're just making sure they understand. And when we're talking about red flag issues, we're talking about not always just inside the home, but yet environmental issues when it comes to outside of the home as well. So, guys, this was property ownership and property ownership disclosures to help you pass your national PSI real estate exam.